What's going on, everybody? How you doing? I'm sorry you had to see that. It's just really painful to have each atom of your body sequentially loaded in by a bash script. And before you say anything, yes, I do know that multi-threading exists. I know that it's existed for a very long time. Bro, do you think I am made of money? It cost me $2.9 million to transport myself right here through just one thread of my CPU. Imagine how much that cost. You know what? I'm not gonna get into it. We're gonna move on to the actual topic of this video. How's it going, everybody? Failed YouTuber here, back again with another hot Linux video. I know, the sexiest topic you could ever talk about. But the reason we're talking about Linux today is actually pretty cool. See, over the past couple of months, my recommendation page on YouTube has been absolutely full of videos of, like, I've tried switching to Linux, or I wanted to switch to Linux just to see where it's at, or, you know, I failed at using Linux. And, like, obviously, some people are going to be more successful than others at trying out this operating system, right? But the trend itself, regardless of the outcome, the trend itself is still really cool to see. And so seeing some of these videos and seeing people's reactions to these videos, it got me in a particularly creative mood. So I'm gonna try my best to wrap up and like reflect upon my past 3 years of using Linux as my daily driver operating system. You know, maybe you'll actually learn something cool. So I think it'd be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and dive into it. I wrote a little bit of a guide here on my laptop. I basically went through the first recording of this video and not transcribed it, but wrote down all the main bullet points, so we're going to try to go through all this stuff again. Okay, so the biggest thing we're going to start off with is the fact that I had to unlearn quite a lot about Windows and computers and stuff like that ever since making the big switch. And, like, I should have seen this coming, right? Like, if you're switching over from Windows to Mac, like, you're gonna expect things to be different, but I did not foresee just how different everything was gonna be. And the funniest thing about that comment is I'm no stranger to Mac OS, right? For a little bit of a history lesson, back when I was a wee lad in, like, oh god, like 2004, 2003, we were a Mac-only household. So we had iPods, we had Macintosh computers. Like, I had the iMac G4 well, I didn't have the iMac G4. My dad had the iMac G4, and that was like my first main computer. Once my dad upgraded to one of the big, like, slab iMacs, he gifted that to me, and that became my first computer. I think this was around 2009-ish. And after having that computer for a couple of years, I decided that I wanted to play video games on it, and gaming on Mac just isn't great. So I finally convinced my parents to 1 year for my birthday gift me a Samsung, like, Windows laptop. Had Windows 7 on it. Goated Windows version, not gonna lie. And so I used that laptop for a few good years. You know, I did my schoolwork on it, played games, talked to friends, until eventually I kind of grew out of that laptop. You know, it wasn't the most powerful thing in the world. Like, it couldn't even run Sniper Elite V2, right? So there were some problems with it. So then I saved up some money, got some Christmas gifts from my grandparents, and got myself a fully built desktop Windows PC, and I used that PC all the way up until about 2021-ish. So for roughly 11, 12 years, I have been only using Windows as my main operating system, right? And in that decade and some change, I've witnessed pretty much everything under the sun, right? Like, I saw the rise and fall of Windows 8. I begrudgingly installed Windows 10 when I got my desktop going. And in 2021, I saw the writing on the wall. I looked at Windows 11, I saw that it looked like shit, and I decided, you know what? Screw it. I live in America, I live in a free country, so why don't I decide what's on my computer? It's my computer, right? Like, I should decide what's on it. And Microsoft coming in, barging into my computer and just saying, no, actually, see, you need to have an online account. You need to sign up for this thing. Hey, have you heard of Microsoft Edge? You really should be using Microsoft Edge. Oh, and guess what? You know, fuck you. We own you now. We're Microsoft. And boy, howdy, you know, like, I kind of hit the nail right on the head with that, because Windows 11, I've never used it personally, right? So I don't have any experience daily driving Windows 11, but from everything I hear about coming from friends and family who use it and seeing stuff on the internet, Oh boy, I'm so glad I made the jump to Linux. Holy shit, Windows 11 looks like absolute dog shit, and I can't get over how bad it is. And like, how could I have foreseen what was coming, right? I think in 2021, was that like just when crypto was starting to get on the rise, was starting to like just go up in public use? And then like, obviously NFTs became a thing. That was fun for about a year and a half. Oh, I just realized, fuck, my Audacity page is still going. Whoops! And now it's like all AI shit. Oh my god, don't even get me fucking started on Windows 11 and their Copilot AI features. It's just, I'm so glad. I'm just so glad I'm out of that. Holy fuck. What was I talking about again? Oh, fuck, yeah, right. I had to unlearn a whole lot of stuff about Windows. This is gonna be a very unorganized video, even though I have a fucking script over here. Like, I just yap, and that becomes a video for a little peek behind the curtain. Anyway, my sister uses Windows, and every time she comes and asks me for like tech support or like computer, like any advice with revolving around her computer, I go in there, I sit down, I see the Windows logo, and I'm just like, Abby, I don't fucking know what's going on here anymore. Like, genuinely, I can't use Windows anymore, dude. It is completely alien to me. Yeah, I'm that far gone. It's crazy. That's enough being negative for now. Let's actually talk about some cool Linux stuff. So, rewind. It's 2021. I see the writing on the wall. I see that Windows 11 looks like dog shit. So I'm like, okay, I want to try out Linux. I want to try switching my entire workflow over to it. What should I use? What distro should I use specifically? In case you're unaware for whatever reason and still watching at this point in the video, a distro is basically just a flavor of Linux. There are different classes of flavors, and there are different ways things are structured, but at the end of the day, it's all still Linux. And so you go online and you see a bunch of these listicles and all these articles and fucking videos talking about what distro you should use, and in my opinion, after about 3 years of daily driving this OS, people kind of overvalue the choice in distro. Overvalue in the sense of like, they make it seem like it's this big decision, like, oh my god, I'm gonna try using Fedora Linux, and it's like, it's not really all that deep. Now that I've sunk my teeth into Linux and I kind of understand a bit better how everything is laid out, like, when you ultimately decide what distro you're using, you're just deciding what, like, pre-bundled toolkit you use. Any tool you want, any piece of software you want, any desktop environment, you can find a packaged distro for it. And each package of software is just meant to fill a use case, right? It's meant to streamline your ability to do the thing you want to do on that distro. Key example are the gaming distros like Garuda and Nobara, and a myriad of others. I think Chimera OS technically counts as those. Honestly, like, I don't really think you should use them, but we'll get into like personal recommendations here in a little bit. So when I was deciding, you know, what distro I should use, the main thing that helped me decide was this video, uploaded to the Linus Tech Tips channel, hosted by, at that point, their name was, now they are Emily. I don't want to dead name anybody, so hosted by Emily. I'm so sorry. And she, at that time, was using Pop! OS, and that was her main, like, pick for new users to, you know, try Linux out with. So I was like, all right, I'll follow her advice. I'll go in, I'll try Pop! OS. It comes with NVIDIA drivers right away. That was another sore spot that I just didn't have any context for, and now after 3 years of using Linux, like, oh my god, fuck NVIDIA, dude. And so I installed Pop! OS, I started using that for a little bit, ran into some problems here and there, but after a while I just kind of grew tired of the, like, cosmic desktop, and so I installed KDE Plasma on top of that. So it was this weird combination of Pop! OS with KDE Plasma, like, sort of stapled on top of it, and I thought to myself, after a while of using that, I thought to myself, like, it's kind of getting a little bit kludgy. I kind of, like, Frankensteined my own distro together. Let's try to get something cleaner. Let's experiment a little bit. Let's switch over to Fedora Linux. And some of you, if you've been around long enough, might know that I did sort of like a mini review of Fedora Linux on my channel all those years ago, and I thought it was pretty cool, so I'm like, alright, let's download the KDE Plasma version, let's install that, let's start running Fedora as my main system. And I did that for probably 8 months to a year, maybe around that time, until I reached the ultimate breaking point. There comes a point in every Linux user's life where they just have to use Arch, by the way. And just like that video back in the day with Emily, I saw this video uploaded by Mutahar. He gave a very clear and concise tutorial on how to install Arch Linux from the command line. So I did that several times because I ended up fucking up my install a couple times, so I had to reinstall Arch like 3 or 4 times, until eventually I finally had a working desktop, I finally had everything I wanted, I started using Arch, and genuinely, I just haven't looked back. I think the reason I like Arch so much, and the reason a lot of people like Arch, is just because it's a very malleable distro. Now, I did just say that people overvalue their choice in distro, so it's a little bit strange for me to sit here and be like, oh, I use Arch, by the way, and, like, you know, toot that fucking horn a million times. And what I said is true. A distro is just a pre-packaged toolkit, right? Arch Linux is more like a blank canvas, honestly. You just get, like, this command window, and you can install fucking whatever you want on top of it. You can finagle it in any way you want. You can, you know, add in the AUR, which adds in even more packages to finagle things. You can really just fuck with Arch, and it will stay relatively stable. Now, when I say stable, it's not going to be like Debian, like LTS stable, for those of you who actually know what that fucking means. Arch Linux is still kind of on the cutting edge of distros, so I wouldn't recommend it to new users, but after you've got some time with Linux under your belt, and you like sort of understand how things are laid out and how things work, oh my god, you can really take advantage of the benefits of Arch. And I think that's why so many people enjoy using it and proudly proclaim they use Arch, just because it's become sort of like a symbol of your knowledge of Linux, you know what I mean? Like, if you can properly install Arch from the command line, like, you know what you're fucking doing. You may or may not be a pro or like an actual professional Linux user, like you're a fucking sysadmin at some big company, but you know more than the average person. And that becomes kind of a badge of honor to some people, so I can kind of understand it, but you know, it just becomes a little annoying after a while. I'll be perfectly honest. Oh yeah, and I should also bring up that on this laptop here on my desk, I've used things like EndeavourOS and Linux Mint, and on my other computer that is now decommissioned, long story, I've used things like Nobara Linux and a few other like gaming-centric distros, and really, like, all of them are cool, you know? If I were to recommend an Arch distro nowadays, I would honestly recommend EndeavourOS, but once you go Arch, you never really go back, dude. Like, it just, I found my little cubby, and I've slotted myself in there, and that is where I will reside until the end of time. Well, I don't know about end of time, but, like, really, there isn't much deeper you can go. I mean, yeah, I could go into Gentoo and Linux from scratch and all that shit, but, like, I'm already at my wit's end with Arch, dude. Like, maybe I'll get into those kinds of things later on in life, but for now, I'm quite comfortable with Arch. Conclusion, Arch is cool, wouldn't recommend it to new users, just go with fucking Linux Mint or Fedora, like those are both great. It's honestly kind of strange to look back on my first video on Linux and just think about like how far I've come in just 3 years. Like, I skimmed through that video and like, dude, man, I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. God, like, I fucking said that there's only Debians and Flatpaks when I didn't even know that app images existed, or fucking snaps or any of that garbage. Golly, dude, I've learned so much in 3 years, it's crazy. But the funny thing is, what that first video represents is, like, A, it's a time capsule of my knowledge at that specific time. I mean, that's kind of true for all of these videos. But I think what that video represents is just how much I wanted this outcome. Like, how much I wanted to be sitting right here talking about this right now. Now, obviously, there are some things that I just didn't foresee that would happen in over 3 years. I didn't think I'd be an Arch user, for one thing. That's kind of crazy. But I still wanted to be free from Windows. I wanted to be completely disconnected. I didn't want to touch Windows with a 10-foot pole at this point, right? And I was still using Windows 10. Good lord, imagine if I'd actually used Windows 11. What the oh my god. I was so fed up that I didn't care what I had to change. I didn't care what I had to learn, to a certain extent. My god, we'll talk about that one later. And I think that's the mindset you need, right? I think you need to be willing to come into Linux and think to yourself like, okay, something's gonna break. Some things are gonna need to be relearned. I'm obviously going to need to open the terminal at some point. But if you stick with it, and you really learn, and you really try to understand, you can get a really solid PC experience and still have most of the stuff that you could do on Windows. Like, some things that people don't really take into account is that Linux, for better or for worse, will do exactly what you want it to do. There's no big company holding your hand. You know, little Clippy isn't gonna come out from the corner and be like, oh, actually, you know, I see you're trying to delete this partition on the hard drive. I see that you're trying to alter your computer. I don't really want you to do that, right? Because if you do that, you're gonna break something, and I don't want to have you call tech support and have some underpaid Indian guy try to explain to you what a partition on your hard drive is. Just don't touch it. Just don't touch it. But like Linux over there in the corner is just taking a long drag of a cigarette and being like, so you really want to delete your root partition? Whatever you say, boss. Hey, Tony, we're deleting the root partition. Yeah, boss's orders. Like, some people think that this whole experience is really cool. I'm one of those people. You know, I prefer having more control over my system. But like, 90% of the people, like, on this planet right now are gonna look at Linux and think, I don't want to fuck with that. I don't want to touch that. It's not worth it. And that's honestly fair enough. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and blame you for deciding that your time is more valuable than whatever you can get out of a computer. If you're not invested in this stuff like I am, then, you know, nothing wrong with that. What's funny is that my biggest opinion shift over the last 3 years has been about the terminal. Because when I first started using Pop! OS, I fucking hated using the terminal. I hated every second of it. I would think to myself, why do I have to bring up this fucking command line? Why do I have to try to type in this thing without knowing the proper syntax, and I have to learn how these commands work, and I gotta learn how everything combines together to do the thing I actually fucking want? What's funny is that I can confidently and accurately compare my entire Linux experience to fighting games. Okay, so let's imagine you've never played a fighting game before in your life, and you turn on Street Fighter 6, and you start by going into the training room and just pressing buttons and seeing what happens. Obviously, when you first get into a training room in your first fighting game, you're not gonna know what's going on. You're not gonna know how to do any of the moves, you're not gonna know what any of the buttons do, you're not gonna know anything, right? Until you look online, or you look at the command list, and you just see, like, what can you do? So you do a little quarter circle forward, and you hit the punch button, and you can throw a fireball. Hallelujah! Now, you might not be able to do it every time, but you were able to do it at least once. And that one time is all you need, because if you keep doing it, if you keep at it, and you practice that muscle memory, and you make it so that you can do it every single time you want to, it's euphoric when you get to that point. So you learn how to throw a fireball, then you start learning how to do other moves, like a Tatsumaki input, or a Dragon Punch input, or you start doing like the fancy down-down inputs that Street Fighter 6 has. You learn the motion inputs, so you get better at playing the game. Then after you kind of have the basics on the moves, then you start learning, you know, more practical in-game concepts. Things like footsies, or spacing, or combo strings, or hit confirms, stuff like that. So you practice these inputs, you practice these concepts, and this knowledge that you're gaining throughout playing this game and understanding its concepts and really trying to learn, that knowledge is going to stay with you. It's in your head. It's not like some RPG or some MMO fucking slop game where, you know, just your numbers go up and you can do more damage by getting the bigger stick, and you hit the guy with the big stick, and it just feels hollow, right? But with fighting games, once you learn that stuff, you can take that knowledge to other characters in the game. You can start thinking like, oh man, Zangief looks pretty cool. I'm gonna try playing Zangief. So you start learning his moves and his little, like, intricacies and idiosyncrasies and stuff like that. Then you can take that knowledge that you've learned and apply it to other games. You learn enough games, then you think to yourself, well, you know, I want to talk to some people about this because it's my new hyper-focus thing. So you start talking with like-minded people, and you start forming connections and bonds with other people over the shared love for this one thing that you have. You start going to events, you start talking to more people, and suddenly, before you know it, you belong to a community, and you have this sense of belonging with stuff. And all of this stemmed from your initial thought of, I'm gonna stick with this, all right? Like, I want to learn this. It's kind of funny to think about how just in a few short years, you can go from being angry at Windows to belonging to a community and having, like, a sense of purpose, you know? It's fucking wild. But now that I think about it, that's actually one of the sour spots of Linux, and one that I do want to talk about in this video, the Linux community. So, I've been using Linux for a while. I've been making videos about Linux for a while. I've been talking about certain things, saying my opinions, particularly on how much I dislike Windows, and I get a lot of comments from Linux people, anti-Linux people, stuff like that. And a lot of people in the community are actually really nice, and they're really patient with me, and, you know, they try to help me out as best as they can. They try to explain gaps in my knowledge when I talk about stuff in videos, and that's really cool. I love to see stuff like that. But then you have certain people who come in and they talk about why they won't ever switch to Linux, why they won't use it. Which, honestly, fair enough, comment section is there for a reason. But some of the common things that I see, here, hold on, let me bring it up on my computer, my laptop, whatever, same thing. You know, I get people who come in and say like, oh, you know, I need to use things like Adobe for my job. The software I need for my job isn't supported on Linux, which is honestly completely fair. Like, I totally understand that. You know, some people come in and they say like they don't want to put up with relearning their operating system. They don't want to relearn everything with Linux. They just don't find purpose in doing it. And it's like, okay, fair enough on that. You know, I can't blame anybody for thinking that. I don't know why you're watching this channel if you have that mindset, but go off, I guess. I don't know. And people will say like, oh, I can't play certain games on Linux. And like, I'll talk about games in a little bit, dude. Like, don't you worry. But just, it really isn't that big of a deal. I promise you. But one comment that I occasionally get is, I would love to switch to Linux if the community wasn't so toxic. And that got me thinking, like, is the Linux community really that toxic? I mean, yes, there's obviously going to be people within every community that are going to be toxic and gatekeepy and fucking just horrible people to be around. This is not a unique thing to Linux, right? Like, you can go to any community and find people like that at a big enough size. 99% of the time, at least in my experience, the Linux community has been very kind, welcoming, and very helpful in their explanations. And like, I'm a dumbass, so like, if the Linux community at large can put up with me and my bullshit, like, I feel like they can put up with a lot of people. Like, I don't want to paint with broad strokes is kind of the point of this whole diatribe, right? I don't want to say that everyone in the community, in any community, is just an inherently toxic person, because that's just not true. Interacting with the community and seeing people talk about Linux and, you know, watching fights on things like Reddit and forum posts, like, I've come down to a few main points that lead to people thinking the Linux community is so toxic. I think one, right here, hold on, I wrote these down, I'm gonna read these out. I think just at a baseline, you know, new users do not have the knowledge or the information at their disposal just to properly interface with Linux. So when they stumble, they kind of just get things wrong and be really confident about it. I've seen that way more often than you'd think. Like, new users coming in saying like, oh, well, this worked before, and then get mad at that, and it's like, you didn't expect that Linux was going to be different from Windows, whatever. I mean, but on the flip side, one thing I also see all too often is that regular users, like Linux veterans, don't really know how to converse with normal people. And like, before you say anything, this is not a unique phenomenon to the Linux community. This happens to any community that stays like as terminally online as some people do, you know? Like, you just kind of lose the ability to think like a regular person thinks. So you kind of just get wrapped up in your own little echo chamber. Like look at any Twitter user, you know? Like, that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And I think this whole toxic spiral that leads to people being angry, it all starts with one person getting frustrated. Like, a new user can get frustrated at not quite understanding certain things about their operating system, so their first instinct is to try to ask someone for help. Fair enough. But then that veteran user comes in and is like, dude, like, I don't want to have to sit here and troubleshoot your fucking problems all day. Like, the documentation is here, you can read it, and sometimes they convey that information in a way that doesn't come across well. So maybe that new user can take that comment the wrong way and then get even more mad at the people trying to offer him help and telling him, hey, here's where you find the help. Because, like, some people, when they ask for help, they don't want a solution, they just want someone to fix it for them. And you cannot get that on Linux. Like, you have to be able to figure shit out on your own. You have to be able to read the documentation. Otherwise, I hate to say it, you're gonna get gatekept. My opinions on this have changed a lot, but ultimately gatekeeping is a good thing when used in moderation. If someone is actively trying to learn and actively trying to understand the thing that they're trying to get into, gatekeeping at that point really isn't the best idea. But if you have someone who's coming in and trying to, for lack of a better term, force it, and just try to get someone to handle it for them, at that point, you can gatekeep them and it'll be totally fine. But obviously, like, this problem of the Linux community is toxic is obviously more nuanced than internet comments will lead you to believe. I just gave all my examples as to why. So I think, like, veterans need to do a better job understanding how normal people think and interact with their computers, and a lot of these Linux challenges have been very, very important in breaking down just how, like, regular users interact with their computers. But at the same time, new users, when they come into this stuff, they need to understand that it's like, dude, like, you need to have a very specific mindset. You need to be willing to learn things, unlearn things, try to challenge yourself. And if you can't do that, then, like, there's nothing wrong with still using Windows. Like, I hate it, but that I'm me. I'm not you. You're not me, you know? Ultimately, it's a problem with communication, right? And communication is very difficult. I've spent my whole life trying to understand how to communicate with others, and I'm still bad at it. Hey, so I completely forgot to mention stuff about video games and gaming on Linux, and honestly, it's fine. It's not really as bad as people think. Like, genuinely, 99% of the games you would want to play work just fine. And we can thank Valve and all the work they put into Proton and SteamOS and the Steam Deck and all that fun stuff. They really are kind of carrying gaming on Linux at the moment. And I'm very grateful for them, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be using Linux right now, you know? In reality, the only games that really aren't going to work are games that heavily rely on invasive kernel-level anti-cheats. Or, you know, any game published by Epic because Tim Sweeney is a fucking coward and doesn't want to support Linux just for no reason. Biggest case in point was the recent fiasco where Rockstar added BattleEye anti-cheat to GTA 5, and that broke Steam Deck compatibility. So it's not Linux's fault that games don't work. It literally is just this culture that we have in games that requires the use of such invasive kernel-level anti-cheats. And if you don't have an opinion on this, I highly suggest you look into this kind of stuff. One look at invasive anti-cheats, it makes my fucking skin crawl. I just hate how invasive we let these gaming companies be for the sake of entertainment, because it's like, oh, we don't want people to cheat. It's like, okay, well, there are other options you can use to get people to not cheat. You don't need to have fucking access to ring 0 of my computer. God help all the Valorant players out there if Riot gets hacked and their anti-cheat gets compromised. But honestly, they're Valorant players. I don't think they ever thought once about what was going on their computer. I'm able to play new releases. I'm able to play old releases. Like, dude, the week that Space Marine 2 came out, I was able to play it just fine. 1440p, high graphics settings. I had it at 60 I think I had it at 90 FPS. Like, I'll probably record some B-roll of Space Marine 2 and put it on the screen right now. Games work. I promise you they work. And you have to put just the same amount of effort as you would with a Windows PC, just in different areas. People forget that Windows gaming PCs are just as, like, finicky and, touchy, and you have to do all this work. Like, PC gaming in general is just a lot of work. And it doesn't matter if you're using Windows or Linux, you're still going to have to put in more effort than you would with, like, a PlayStation or an Xbox. I recommend just playing a bunch of indie games, dude. Like, here, let me open up my Steam page right now and look at some indie games I've got. All right, so easy recommendations from me would be Smooshy Come Home, would be Crumble, A Hat in Time is a very popular one, Celeste is obviously really good, Balatro has eaten away more of my life than I care to admit, Axiom Verge is a phenomenal Metroid game, Orbo's Odyssey, bro. Orbo's Odyssey is such a great fucking time. I think that game took me like an hour to beat. Like, you really owe it to yourself to play Orbo's Odyssey if you want just a fun time. And I could keep going with indies, non-indies, modern, AAA, AA, whatever. I could keep going, but gaming is not just this horrendous feedback loop we've trapped all of ourselves in. You don't need to play the MMO. You don't need to play the big multiplayer shooter. You can play co-op games with your friends. You don't need to fucking play Valorant to be part of a friend group, dude. And like, it genuinely, it's just so frustrating to me that people choose to be in these situations, you know, whether it's because they're just addicted to the feedback loops of those games, or, you know, some other external social reason, or maybe it's just because they hate themselves. I don't know. I don't know why anyone would choose to play any of these games. And I just want more of these indie games to succeed, because they're so good. Like, I love all of these games, and like, just, fuck, I'm gonna have links to all of the Steam pages in the description. If you want my personal pick of, you know, indie games and everything, I might add more as the time goes on. I don't fucking know. But yeah, point is, gaming on Linux, just fine. Like, really, you don't need to worry about it too much. If you're that worried about losing out on like 4 games when you have access to thousands upon thousands, I didn't even talk about emulators, dude. Emulators are so fucking easy to set up on Linux, which they're just so easy to set up in general. You have access to so many games, both classic, new, everything. And like, I know, you don't need to have Linux to open these doors up. You can play these games on Windows, no problem. It's just so frustrating, man. Anyway, just back to what I actually recorded. Sorry for absolutely destroying the pacing of this video. But I think the coolest thing about this little experiment that we're doing right now is just reflecting on how much I understand, how much I've learned over the past 3 years, and like how often I apply the knowledge that I've learned. Because that's kind of it, right? Like, I appreciate, I really, really like the process of learning a topic, understanding it, and then applying the knowledge of what you just learned. It's why I like fighting games so much. Like, I get to create videos like these, I get to be artistic, and I get to challenge myself with these things, and then I get to go over here and do, like, some technical stuff. I get to understand this technical side of things, and then apply that technical knowledge to my creative endeavors, and then apply my creative endeavors to technical challenges. It becomes this, like, feedback loop of just like, wow, I'm actually learning things. Isn't this fucking awesome? Like, I would fucking hate it if I learned Linux through, like, an IT program or something, you know? Because, like, God, I can't think of a more boring career path than sitting in some stuffy-ass room, mulling over the code base that someone else wrote 40 years ago, handling some database of people I've never met and will never meet, in this big fucking capitalist machine that I exist in, just to be a cog in this fucking gross machine and earn like $10 because of it. Like, fuck, just fuck. Sorry, I got a little bit too deep with that one, but you understand what I'm trying to say. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of it, you know? I know this video was very rambly, but I want to wrap this video up by talking about something that is more philosophical in nature. So, using Linux for the past 3 years, I've sort of been re-examining how I interact with technology and how technology interacts with me, and like how it all interacts with the world around me, how the world responds to these new and emerging technologies. And like, honestly, I just come to the conclusion that less is more. So, okay, like, I know how I'm going to sound when I talk about this kind of stuff. I know that I'm going to sound pretentious, right? I understand, but just hear me out for a little bit. So, the society that we live in is very consumer-focused, at least here in the United States, right? And that's the only frame of reference I have, unfortunately. I would love to hear your experiences in, like, other countries with, like, different approaches to technology, but at least in the US, we're very consumer-focused and very throwaway-heavy. What the fuck does that mean? Okay, so, like, take, for example, the person who gets a new iPhone every 3 or 4 years, maybe even 1 or 2 years. What is Apple going to do with that iPhone when you trade it in and get the new one? Like, are they going to recycle it? Are they going to reuse the parts? Are they just going to throw it away? Looking into this kind of stuff, the conclusion is just, yeah, they're going to throw it away and they're just going to fill some landfill with just a fuck ton of e-waste and just pollute this planet that we're living on. When the iPhone that you had, that you traded in, was just fine and would have worked for maybe a decade plus if you took care of it. But there are so many systems in place and so many like little tweaks to people's brains that have been done by these companies that just lead to like everything seems really disposable. You know what I mean? Like, music is instantly streamed, movies, books are instantly streamed. They're trying to make games instantly streamed just to, like, take away that connection. Digital-only games are becoming the new, like, way to buy games and stuff like that. It's all just leading to a system where we don't really own anything anymore. Like, I can kind of see where this is going, and I don't like it. So, like, why would I worry about having more technology, having the newest technology, always being on the bleeding edge of things, when I know that I'm not going to have as good of an experience with the old thing? Like, a key example is, like, vinyls and Blu-rays, dude. Like, hold on, let me go grab one. This is the entire series of Cowboy Bebop. I bought this Blu-ray at a local bookstore for like 60 bucks, right? Not cheap, but it's the entire series, all contained on, I think it's 4 discs. Let me see. Yeah, 4 discs. I know that this system isn't perfect, right? I know that these discs will eventually rot away. I know that eventually these discs are going to stop working, and I'm not going to be able to watch this series anymore on this specific disc. But what I can do is I can rip the files off of these Blu-rays, and I can put them on our Plex server. In the background for the past 3 years, my dad and I have been setting up a Plex home media server, and I've been collecting music off Bandcamp, I've been buying Blu-rays and vinyls, I've been amassing a collection of sorts. And this isn't like just a collection for collection's sake. This is everything that I want, and I'm allowed to have this collection, but also have some of the modern benefits of music streaming by having a Plex server. So instead of being reliant on Spotify or Amazon Music, just putting an album up and then maybe one day they'll take the album away from me, I can just go on Bandcamp, support an artist more directly, buy the album from them, and then put that on my Plex server and stream that to my phone whenever I want. Now, that did take a lot of time and effort and energy to set up properly, but in the end, it was worth it. And honestly, like, just, it's cool to, like, hold things, you know? Like, I grew up in the early to mid 2000s, right? Like, back in those days, I was born in 1997. Back in those days, technology was cool. It was evolving. It was gadgets and gizmos that could do all these things, and you could do more with, like, less, simpler devices. And, like, every couple years, there was this brand new thing that would do, like, this whole new thing that no one ever thought could happen. And, like, fuck. Technology was just cool back then, man. Like, I witnessed everything going from The Matrix to the Frutiger Arrow fucking, like, design of the early to mid 2000s, all the way to the minimalist hellscape we live in today. And I think the key difference between technology in the early to mid 2000s and technology today is that a piece of technology was just allowed to be what it is. You know what I mean? It was allowed to be simple. It was allowed to be a unitasker, in a way. So a game console was just a game console. It was a little thing you put discs in and you played a video game. Or it was a Game Boy, you put the cartridge in, you played the game. It was very simple. But then as technology improved, more devices could start doing more things, which was really cool up until a certain point where now every piece of technology you could ever want has been homogenized into the phone. The phone can do a lot of things. You can read books, you can write books, you can watch movies, TV shows, listen to music, you can talk to friends, you can fucking 3D model, you can become a VTuber. The phone can do so much stuff, but it can't really do any of those things particularly well. It can only do them okay. Be honest with me. Would you really watch a movie on your phone instead of going to a fucking movie theater or just watching it on a big screen TV? I can't watch movies on my phone, dude. Like, I need to be able to have a big screen in front of me to watch a movie. And listening to music is the same way. Like, I get such a different vibe, such a different feeling in my soul when listening to a vinyl than I do just streaming it on YouTube. And, like, holding a book, holding a physical manga in my hand is so much more engaging and fulfilling to me than just having my app have all my manga on there for me. The point is, technology is not nearly as fun, right? So what I did was I purged a lot of the stuff that I didn't want, and I'm slowly reintroducing these modern conveniences back into my life, right? Linux was the catalyst for this. Because I went to Linux, I switched over to it, and it looked at me in the eye, and it told me, hey, motherfucker, you can't use Adobe. Fuck you. You can't play League of Legends, and you can't use Microsoft Edge. And I'm like, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, well, those aren't really bad things, are they? I'm just kind of more disconnected from everything. And that's the way I want it. I don't want to play these overly monetized slop games that are just meant to be more of a distraction or more of a job than a piece of entertainment, you know? I want to spend more time diving into indie games and playing games made by people with passion and love for a medium. I want to interact with my computer. I don't want to just look at it through a window. Haha, funny analogy there. My point is, at the end of all of this, Linux is cool. I've appreciated my time with it. I will continue to appreciate my time with it, and I'm very glad that more people are trying out Linux and just getting into this thing that has provided me so much more, I guess, clarity in my technological uses. It hasn't been perfect, obviously. There have been some hiccups. There have been things I need to learn. There have been trials and tribulations all throughout these past 3 years. But really, would I give it up and go back to Windows? No, I would not. And I certainly am not going to go to Mac. Fuck that. So, at the end of this video, I want to sit and I want to thank the YouTube lads who support me directly and help this channel grow and, you know, are really patient with the fact that, you know, I fucking killed the last video. God damn it. Like, okay. I'm re-recording this whole video, like I said. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated at that. But I want to spin this in a way to just say thank you for being so patient with me and allowing me to take time to, like, refocus and make this video again as best as I can. You're all truly wonderful, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a good one, everybody.